short term, yes. And we need to have willpower, and we need to buoy up our willpower with, I'll share that with you later, how to do that. But how do we deal with our habits, our unhealthy habits? We want to make good ones. So, can you think of anything we learned from earlier this afternoon? Anybody at all? This afternoon, this is your time. Share with me. What is it that you got? Okay, let me ask it a different way. Did you learn anything? Oh, good, whatever, Lee. Okay, what is it that you learned? Just one thing. Just tell me one thing. Yes. Okay, more vegetables, yeah. Kind of the idea is if you can get 4 vegetables a day, that'd be pretty good. 4 fruit a day, 4 vegetables a day. I usually have 2 meals a day. I'm not into hard physical labor. I don't really need 3 meals. I like 3 meals, but I don't need it. And so what I do is for the first meal a day, I usually center around fruit. Second meal, around vegetables. First meal, fruit and grains. Second meal, vegetables and grains. First meal, with the fruit and grains, I usually have nuts and seeds. The second meal, with the vegetables and grains, I usually have legumes, like beans and lentils and stuff like that. That would be the ideal for me. I don't always keep to that, but that's the ideal, and that's what has helped me in the past. That sort of thing. So, do you remember this? This is probably the most important question we could ask regarding nutrition for ourselves. Is this food that I want to have or want to buy at the grocery store or at any other store, does it grow from a tree that way? Does it grow from a bush or a garden or a vine? That way, like grapes. There's a difference between eating a grape. Are these grapes? No, they're blueberries, aren't they? They're blueberries. So there's a difference between eating grapes and then eating grape juice. Or there's a difference between eating apples and apple pie. There's a difference between eating potatoes and French fries. And so, and what's the difference? Can someone tell me? Process. That's pretty well the answer. You have processed versus unprocessed. Natural versus unnatural. That's kind of the answer right there. So let's go ahead. This picture here, it comes from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I took a course from them, and they have it kind of nicely done up. So half our food, if it is half fruits and vegetables, it is very, very healthy for us. And if a quarter of it is plant proteins, and another quarter is whole grains, you put all that together with drinking water between meals, you got yourself, how would I word it? A miracle diet, maybe? But it's not miracle, it's science. And so if you can manage that more times than not, every day if possible, then you pretty well, especially if you haven't been on this at all, and you start to go on this, I guarantee you 100%, you'll notice a difference within a week. Other people will see the difference within a month. And you will feel like a brand new person. It's just that powerful. What we eat becomes who we are. So notice again, unlock nature's formula for optimal body, mind, vitality. We're dealing with nature's formula. And nature's formula is packaged in the acronym Full Power. So each letter of Full Power is a health principle, just kind of like New Start. So we did a little bit of this up front. Prioritize high-octane fuel. We did that this afternoon. We're going to touch on chapter 7 and 8 right now. Tonight, I'm not going to get it all, get what we can. And then for tomorrow morning, find your superpower, which will be the beginning of the answer to the problem I'll bring up today. So that's kind of where we're going with this. Any thoughts on that? If you want to do any homework, go to the website fullpower1.com. And you can download the workbook if you wish, and then you can fill out the habit trackers in the workbook if you want to do that, or the vitality assessment at the beginning. So I won't get into that too much, but today we'll be working on pages 23 and 24 and 25. And here's what it looks like in the workbook. So on page 23, checklist for prioritize high octane fuel. One question. answer these in a question on a scale of 0 to 10 and give yourself your score right there. And for tonight, omit what is harmful. First one, I avoided refined foods. What are they? Foods processed with processed sugar, oil, white flour, and ingredients. So that's just one of the 10 questions. And so you fill that out and get yourself a score of 10. You add up all those scores. There's 9 of those habit trackers. Why? Because there's 9 principles. And then you add them all up, you get your average of 100, and then you find out if you get a bronze, silver, or gold, or if you're under a bronze, silver, or gold, which is under 50%. So you can add all that up. So we're going to take a look at our full power treasure chest and pull out one more wonderful golden nugget called omit what is harmful. This is where we're going to deal with willpower. This is where we're going to deal with habits. We have to deal with habits. It's prescribed by Dr. Mother Nature herself. So I'll begin with a story. I was learning guitar about 35 years ago or more, actually probably closer to 40 years ago, from a man named Eric in Newfoundland. I used to be a pastor in Newfoundland. And so my wife and I were walking along and said, oh, I wish I could learn guitar because we don't have, we had a small church, no a piano player in there or organ player. So I needed to play my own music. I needed to learn guitar so I could play music for the people in church. And so my wife says, you know, there's this guy named Eric. He used to be a Salvation Army band leader. He was like really talented. So we just knocked on his door. And we said, I understand that you teach guitar. Oh, yes, you do that. Can you teach me? So here we are learning guitar. He played the trombone before the Queen of England. That's how good he is. He knows piano. He can play like Royal Conservatory piano up to grade 10, 11, or 12. He knows guitar. He knows like every instrument known to man. And so I was learning guitar from him. I learned how to cheat on piano. Everybody takes 12 years to learn piano. I learned it in 1 hour from him by cheating. Basically, chords with left hand. That's pretty well what it is. And so now we're finished our guitar lesson. And then he pulls out a cigarette. In front of me, he pulls out a cigarette. We're friends. I don't go away after the lesson. I stick around because we're buddies now. And then he says these words to me. I remember these words to this very day, exactly as he said them. He looked at me. He held the cigarette in his hand up in the air like this. And he said, I have never loved or hated something so much in my life as this cigarette. That's what he said. And I think I understood where he was coming from. He loves smoking. Anyone here smoked before? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Did
I tried it once. It was terrible.
Tried it once. And so usually when people are smoking, it feels good. Did it feel good at the time? Can't remember. Well, it's probably a good thing. And, however, this guy was saying, I love smoking. It feels good. But I hate it. So he loves it, and he hates it. He loves how it makes him feel short term, but he knows it's killing him long term. So this kind of thing made me think he was articulating the most powerful insight in the world, the battle between short-term pleasures and long-term goals. That right there is the battle that every human being faces, and how we handle that battle determines our success in life. Right there. Short-term pleasures versus long-term goals. It happens in so many different circumstances, not just the food that we eat. It's a battle. As a matter of fact, for those of you who know your Bibles, it's the difference between the flesh and the spirit. Romans chapter 7, if you want to know. And so here's this guy. He's fighting the same battle, but only it's not with cigarettes. He's looking at that apple juice. Okay. What is that? Whiskey? Pardon? Scotch. Thank you for telling me. Scotch whiskey. So he's looking at that. You can tell he's tempted. You can tell he wants to drink it, but he doesn't want to drink it. And that's the battle that a lot of us fight. And that's the battle between the flesh and the spirit. It's also the battle that Daniel won back in Daniel chapter 2 when he was told that he was going to have the best wine in all the land. No. He resolved in his heart he would not defile himself with the king's not high octane fuel, but highly expensive food. So he said no. Now, even this lady here, Christina Aguilera, about 20 years ago, sang a song called "Save Me from Myself," because I want to do and eat and drink the things I know are going to kill me. Save me from myself. And so she understands this. And so this battle is actually worldwide. Everybody, most people, not everybody, has a battle. What about food then? Alcohol, drugs, cigarettes. What about food? Does it look like he's having a battle? He does not look like he wants to make that decision. Which way is he going to go? Short-term pleasures. Long-term goals. He wants this, but he needs this. He knows he needs, so he wants this. But it doesn't taste as good as this. You can develop a taste for that, but usually it's this stuff here that we want the most. I know where you are on that. So, a man named Dr. Gwa'sala, he wrote a book on heart health. And he was a cardiologist, he worked with heart patients, he worked with the worst heart patients, not just regular old heart patients, the worst ones. And he developed a way to reverse heart disease. This is what we're talking about this weekend, heart disease. But it correlates with so many other diseases, long-term chronic diseases. So here he is on a TED Talk. You can look him up, just go to YouTube, put TED Talk, call Gwa'sala, and you will see that there. Now you can't really read that very well, so there he is kind of walking. Here he is walking on stage there, and he's showing this graph, I think it's called a PET scan. How much is on blue up there? All right, kind of blurry. Let's just make it clear. So he is showing this to the people, and he says, and then he was talking, I don't know, about maybe 10 years ago. He says back in November 27, 1996, he took a picture, not a picture, but a PET scan or something, of a man's arteries, and look how thick it's supposed to be and how narrow it got. And that narrow artery is what caused the heart attack. The blood could not get through and supply the oxygen and the fuel to the muscle of the heart. And then he fed this man, among others as well, high-octane fuel, vegetables, fruit, nuts, and grains, legumes. He took him off of everything else, everything. I mean, he is radical. Why? This man's going to die, that's why. So it's time for him to get radical. So no meat, no white flour, just really, really radical and really, really healthy. And then in July, 2.5 years later, 1999, can you see the difference? Same area, but here. I mean, many doctors says that can't happen, but he proved that it did happen just by what we eat and what we don't eat. Now, the part that I don't like about what Dr. Esselstyn said is the stuff he says don't eat. It's the very stuff I want to eat. And maybe you too, I don't know. Here he is, and he'll show you these are blood vessels. You see they're atherosclerotic. You see the cholesterol. There's only a little tiny room for the blood cells to go through, and he was able to turn that into that. Amazing. Amazing. It can happen. So he took an unhealthy situation, and he made it into a healthy situation, and he did it more than once. So that's why he can stand up in front of an audience. He actually used to work for the Cleveland Clinic. Huge, big building. Just huge, big building for research, medical research, and all that kind of stuff. And so he's able to stand up, and he will point his finger in your face, and he will tell you what for. Because he has seen it with his very own eyes, how we damage our cells. There's a difference between the two. So he'll get up, and he wrote this book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, the revolutionary, scientifically proven Nutrition-based, can you read that word? Cure. Cure. If I were to write a book on that and say I have a cure, I would get sued by the medical association. How dare you say you have a cure? But he puts it in his title. He said, if you want to contest this, if you want to argue with me, you go right ahead because I've got the science to prove it. I cured heart disease, he said. I cured it. And so I am hesitant to say that word, but he said it. And so what does he say? He says, you need to do things that really don't come natural for you to do in this day and age. They were natural 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and 2,000 years ago, but the last 50 years, 70 years or so, not so natural for us anymore. Here's how he'll start. No oil. No oil. You say, I don't think you heard me. No oil. And then no oil. He'll say that. This is not even olive oil. Now he's dealing with heart patients with that stuff, with the cholesterol in the blood vessels, which goes against a lot of other advice out there because there's other people say, you need oil. Right? So what's going on here? The reality is, says Caldwell Esselstyn, that oils are extremely low in terms of nutritive value. They contain no fiber, no minerals. They're 100% fat, 120 calories per tablespoon. Both the monounsaturated, saturated fat contained in oils is harmful to the endothelium. What a word, endothelium. What's that? It says the innermost lining of the artery. And that injury is the gateway to vascular disease. Pretty heavy statement there. Pretty heavy statement. Because I'm guessing that 99% of us would have oil in one form or another. We fry in it, or we put it on salad dressings or whatever. I don't know about you, but I certainly have. Every time we eat processed food, usually there's oil in it. And so, but here he is saving lives. And he gets so radical, he says, not even olive oil. Now, the science will there's some debate on this. There's some debate in the science, maybe you know about it. And if you're going to have to have oil at all, go extra virgin olive oil. That's the least harmful. I'm not saying it's the healthiest. Well, it is the healthiest, but it's only the healthiest because it doesn't harm as much as the other oils. Extra virgin, cold pressed, extra virgin olive oil. But he said even olive oil is harmful. So what's this thing with the endothelium that he says is, the endothelium is just, think of a pipe, think of the inside of the pipe like a blood vessel, and that inner line is just a very, very fine lining. And it's just so dynamic. Molecules can get through it into the blood vessel wall and stuff. But when that happens, see, when oil comes in there, that inner lining is so amazing. It actually produces something called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide makes your blood vessels kind of malleable. It sort of, they can go up, go wide and go narrow, and they can be stretched and they go round. It's really good. It's really good. But when your blood vessels get stiff, then your blood pressure goes up, and then heart attack risk goes up too. So we need to have that nitric oxide to be able to do its thing. And oil stops nitric oxide from being secreted. And that's why he says no oil. That's why he says that. This is the mechanism behind it all. And so, and it's not like putting oil in your car, it kind of lubricates everything. No. In your body, oil has a chemical reaction, not a mechanical reaction. And so this is why he's saying no oil. So now I find that rather hard to take. Because there's lots of oil in potato chips. Lots of oil in most baking. What do we use in baking for oil? Shortening, fat oil. It's just everywhere. It's everywhere. But the problem is the oil has been extracted from its natural setting and then put as an ingredient in a particular recipe. Billions, probably millions of recipes. If you want to know what Ellen White says, she says oil is eaten in the olive. She actually says that, as eaten in the olive. So eat the olive, not the So it says it doesn't matter whether it's olive oil, corn oil, coconut oil, canola oil, or any other kind of oil. Avoid all oil, it says. Then I'm reading this book. I was introduced to this book by Dr. Hans Deal at Camp Hope, actually in the town of Hope, when camp meeting was going on. And then it's called Salt, Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. That's what it's called. Anyone ever heard of this book before? It's quite an interesting book. And he's got a second book too called Hooked. Hooked. And the idea is that these food giants, like say McDonald's or any processed food, they will hire brain scientists to create taste sensations in our brain, the pleasure centers of our brains, so that it reaches what they call the bliss point, so that it makes it taste so good, but it's the pleasure in our brains, not the fuel in our bodies. That's really what we want. And so, but these scientists make the food taste so good that we want more of it, and we become addicted. That's what they want to have happen. McDonald's French fries are a case in point. That's what he says. How the food giants hooked us. I won't read too much of that, but the ingredients that make processed food. So we're fighting a battle, and the food giants are not helping us. We're kind of on our own, because the environment that they create makes it hard for us to eat healthy. The 5 blue zones, the places in the world where people have lived the longest, there's actually about 40 of them now, but 5 original. The reason why they ate so well was because their environment. There's no McDonald's in Okinawa at that time when they found Okinawa and you lived to 100 years old. Everything in their environment was conducive to healthy choices. But now it's not that way. Everywhere we go, there's advertisements and it's packaging that's conducive to unhealthy choices. So our environment really makes a difference. And so the reason for this image, which I've shown now twice, is that eating processed food is like running the tap. The processed food is the cause of the damage being done in our bodies. So this is the analogy there. This is damage being done, and so often the industries around us, healthcare industry included, get us to focus on the damage that's being done. But the health message that we are sharing focuses on the cause of the damage. Turn off the tap. Turn off the continuous cause of damage in our bodies, which is admittedly hard to do because the food tastes too good. We don't want to give it up. And so this is why in the Full Power Plan, we can transform our body mind by embracing root cause solutions. That's what the book is about, the root causes of it all. And we get this, first of all, from the Bible, second of all, from the Spirit of Prophecy, and third of all, from science. The book is more about the science, but only the science that agrees already with the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy. That's why I'm so excited to talk to you about the Full Power acronym, because it just is so rooted in science, but yet it already came from God. It's so cool. And so that's why I'm so excited about it. So now let's just get into some of the real-life scenarios. By talking to you about Mary, this is Mary's willpower tank. Think of your willpower as like a tank of fuel, and as you run throughout the day, you go lower and lower on the fuel, lower and lower on the willpower. Mary is a mother of 2 children. She's a wife to a husband, and she gets up in the morning with a full tank of willpower. And she has units of willpower, and we'll describe it kind of like making it look a little bit like a battery. So at breakfast time, she's getting breakfast for her children, and there's a donut there on the counter, and she resists the donut. It's got white flour, it's got sugar, she knows it's not good for her, she resists the donut. But in resisting the donut, she used up 10 units of willpower. Then she gets to work, and there's a bowl of chocolates on the secretary's desk as she goes into work, and she resists those chocolates. There's milk chocolate, full of sugar and dairy and oils. But it takes 20 units of willpower to do that. She does it. Throughout the day, she's making decisions. She's on the phone, she's doing emails, on her computer, she's making decisions. And the very act of making decisions uses up some of that willpower tank. Literally speaking, it actually uses glucose in the brain, in the prefrontal cortex, and much of the cerebral cortex. And our brains, of course, as you know, use up more energy than anything else in our bodies. Just the idea of making a decision, especially making a hard decision when you're craving and you're resisting. That takes a lot of they call it ego depletion, but it's also can be measured with glucose being used up in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So she's using it up. She's using it up. So now she's only down to 30 units of willpower left for the day. She is now resisting the butter at lunch. She loves butter, but she resists. That's 10 more. And then she resists the donut. Someone had a donut. They offered it to her. She said no. And then she makes her last decision before she goes out the door to go back home again to see her children and her husband. And she sees the donut on the counter. What does she do? And she swallows every bite in like 2 seconds. Question, what happened to Mary? What's going on in Mary's brain? When Mary eats that donut at nighttime, she had the strength to resist it in the morning, but at nighttime, you get like this sometimes? You ever find that the more you go into the day, like especially at nighttime, it's so easy to eat the junk food. I find it anyway. It's easier to eat the junk food at nighttime. If it's like 7 o'clock at night and I want to go on a date with my wife or something, I don't want to eat broccoli. I want to have French fries or ice cream or chocolate something or other. It's just something about the way you go through the day. And this is why. It has to do with something we call the willpower tank. It gets depleted the more we use it. So when we're resisting all the time, mothers with behavior problem children, for example, really hard because they're always fighting all the time, trying to be kind and patient. And that takes work. And that takes, just for the Christians, external energy on high to be able to do that. Now, the point is, addictive foods are designed by people. Non-addictive foods are designed by nature. When I say nature, it's a design nature, right? So that's the difference. Designed by people versus designed by God, designed by nature. Addictive foods, non-addictive foods. Have you ever gone to an AA meeting, and I have, and someone gets up and says, "Hi, I'm John." Everybody says, "Hi, John." Then John says, "Here's my story of addiction." Have you ever gone to a Broccoli Eaters Anonymous? Oh, my story, I remember the first time I got hooked on broccoli. It's really taken me down. You never hear that. You never hear, why? Because broccoli was made by nature. And you don't get hooked. You don't get hooked on that. And who'd want to eat all that broccoli anyway? But if you can, all the better for you, right? And usually people try to get broccoli down by putting a lot of salt and butter on it and stuff like that. So now let's get into a little bit of neurobiology here. Sugar and flour. Sugar and flour, especially white flour, deplete dopamine receptors. Anybody ever heard of dopamine before? Dopamine? Sometimes it's called the pleasure hormone. More accurately, it should be called the anticipation of pleasure hormone. It's the hormone in the body that's most related to addictions. We're anticipating that pleasure. So we do that thing. And it could be gambling. It could be behaviors. It could be pornography. It could be shopping. It could be substances like drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, or food. And so whatever it is, the anticipation of that pleasure is seen mostly in dopamine, hooking into dopamine receptors between the two neurons of the brain. So imagine a wire, which represents like say, a nerve in the brain, a wire. You cut the wire up into 1-inch segments, and you lay them all out, and now the electricity has to go through from one end to the other, but it has to jump that little gap between all those 1-inch segments. That, in the brain, is called a synapse. And that's where everything good happens, and that's where everything bad happens when it comes to addiction. That little jump. And so whenever we make a decision, it sends like an electrical signal down the wire in our brain. And then it gets to the end of the neuron, it's going to jump to the next neuron. And when it jumps to the next neuron, the electrical signal changes into a chemical called neurotransmitters. And it changes, and then it jumps, and it changes, and it jumps. So that's what's happening in our brain like 1 billion times a second. Just thinking does that. So imagine thinking about anticipation of something that you really crave, like say alcohol or potato chips, or why do I keep on saying potato chips? Anyway, so now a normal brain, this is the dopamine receptors. Dopamine is a hormone. A hormone is a very bossy molecule. A hormone is a molecule that tells other body systems what to do. So it's a very powerful molecule. It's called a hormone. And so cortisol is a hormone. Dopamine is a hormone. Serotonin is a hormone. They tell other body parts what to do. So in a normal brain, look at this right here. You see, look at the size. Normal brain, okay, inside. Now, in a brain that with a cocaine addiction, notice the difference here. Dopamine receptors, not nearly as many. And someone who is obese, not addicted to cocaine or drugs, they are obese, which means often, it doesn't always mean this way, but often it's because of the food they eat. And so notice this looks like a cocaine addict, this kind of thing here. So this is what we see. Now I don't want to oversimplify this. I'm not saying that sugar and flour causes as much addiction as cocaine does. With obesity, there are a number of other contributing factors, and that is a very important point to make, which I will make it in the next few minutes. But just note that the anticipation of the pleasure of the food that we eat can be seen in the brain. Can be seen in the brain. Okay? So having said that, we're now going to contrast decision-making with habits. Because when you have a habit, you don't make a decision, you just do it. There's no battles at all, you just do it. Whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, you just do it, it's a habit. So let's talk about that. Remember Mary's willpower tank. So the basal ganglia is a part of the brain, you see that in red. And so in The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg has written, and it's become quite common in the literature now. Habits are automatic behaviors. They're traced to a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. That portion of the brain is associated with emotions. Like, oh, I felt so good when I had that chocolate last week. And that's a memory, and I want to have it again. Patterns and memories, all right? So emotions, patterns, and memory. This is the basal ganglia. It does not require much energy to operate. It does not require much glucose to run, the basal ganglia. It just works easily and so nicely. But decisions, on the other hand, are made in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. We could call it the lower brain versus the higher brain. Maybe we could even call it the flesh versus the spirit, but that might be going a little bit too far. But there is some kind of association there. Now, when a behavior becomes a habit, we stop using our decision-making skills, and instead we function on autopilot, which is great for good habits and terrible for bad habits. The interesting thing here is that when we make a decision like to resist food that we know is unhealthy, or resist anything that's unhealthy, The act of resisting takes 20 times more glucose in the prefrontal cortex than in the basal ganglia. So that's why making a decision, especially to resist something, takes energy. And that's why we can use the analogy of a willpower tank that gets depleted every time we make decisions. And we make hundreds of decisions all day long. And usually they're fine. But keep this in mind. Now, so you take a look at her. What's she looking at there? Oh, I must not eat this. I must not eat this. She's saying, I must not. She is trying to use her willpower to resist that. What's that, a Danish or something? You know it's got like flour, oil, and sugar in it, right? It tastes so good. And she's just like my guitar teacher, Eric, who loved the cigarette, but he hated the cigarette. So she's in the same position. Just like that guy looking at the Scotch whiskey. He loves it, but he hates it, you know? But this is not the way to do it. Not the way to do it. It doesn't work. I mean, it might work short term. So instead, we start with this. Become aware, saying, this is a temptation. It's called autocognition. It's called metacognition. The very first step to resist is to acknowledge that, hey, I'm being tempted right now. It's the very first step. So we say, what foods, or will this food advance me toward my long-term goals? Now, just answering that question won't automatically give you the strength to resist. It could, if it was just a little temptation. But it may take more, and we'll talk about the more. But this is where it starts. This is where it starts. Short-term versus long-term decisions. My long-term goals are health and happiness and strength and energy, mobility. Those are long-term goals. You know, success and all that wonderful stuff. Short-term goal, I want pleasure right now. That's a short-term goal. Here's an interesting thought. I got this from Dr. Gabor Mate, a doctor who worked on Vancouver's downtown east side with drug addicts. He wrote a number of books. He wrote about 7 books. All of them become New York Times bestsellers. I read 2 of them, maybe 3. And in one of his books, I'll be quoting him in a moment, he talks about the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain, part of the cerebral cortex, where we reason, where we have reason, where we rationalize. We don't rationalize, but it's rational. And then he talks about the basal ganglia and the limbic system inside the lower part of the brain. So comparing and contrasting the two fighting each other. So you're going down the sidewalk, and you see a mother pushing a baby in a stroller, and the baby has an ice cream in her hand. And you love ice cream. Now, you want the ice cream. Immediately, you have your dopamine kicking in and say, I anticipate the pleasure of that ice cream. Tell me, why do you not steal the ice cream from the baby? Why don't you? Other people are looking. Yes, anything else? Tell me. Why not? Taboo. Taboo? Yeah. Anything else? You don't want to get arrested? Someone would say, because I'm an adult, so that's why. You know, all of these answers are true, but all of these answers require you to think in the cerebral cortex about what are the consequences of my actions. Short term, long term. Short term, I want to steal that candy or that ice cream and eat it now, that's short term. But when you make that decision, I'm not going to take that ice cream, that's a stupid thing to do, I might hurt the baby, hurt the mother, somebody might be watching, all this, that's your regulation system. Regulating your limbic system. It's regulation. Now, when we give in to temptations 100 times, 1,000 times, that regulation strength goes down and down and down. Soon you don't have the strength to resist. If you're addicted, you're going to steal that ice cream. Even you don't care, because that's what happens in the brain. Okay, that's what happens in the brain. Does that make sense? Now let's figure out what we can do about that. This. All right. What's happening here? There's that chocolate. You know, the oil just natural chocolate off the cocoa bean. Well, it's different, but this is not that, this is process. So we have strength to resist. We need to have strength to resist, and the strength to resist temptation does not come through focusing on the temptation. This is where people get it wrong. They focus, I must not do this, I must not do this, I must not do this. That is not the long-term answer. Instead, overcoming temptation is a byproduct of focusing on something greater. Read that again. Overcoming temptation is a byproduct of focusing on something greater. Let me see if I can put this on the word on the screen here. As a safeguard against temptation, the preoccupation of the mind with good is worth more than unnumbered attempts at self-discipline. Think about it. So, let's just say love donuts. What's the donut shop? Is there a donut shop here in Fort Lauderdale? Tim Hortons? Oh, you're so lucky. But I know I have an A&W, I saw that. And a McDonald's, okay. I haven't seen McDonald's. So, just say love donuts. How about Kentucky Fried Chicken? Do you have that here? Okay, let's go with Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know why? Because it sends up this aroma. I love Kentucky Fried Chicken. And you know it's got the grease, it's got the salt, it's deep fried that, all that kind of stuff. But you smell it. Oh, and then you go in and you're going to get some. Okay? That is the short-term consideration. Now, what if you had a goal? Your goal was to meet somebody and whatever. And you're on your way to your goal. And on your way to your goal, you smell Kentucky Fried Chicken. But you're so busy focusing on your goal, temptation doesn't hit you nearly as hard. Why? Because you're focusing on something else. This is what Ellen White means when she says these words. The preoccupation of the mind with good, whatever that good is for you, using your gifts and your talents to help other people, for example, is worth more than unnumbered attempts at self-discipline. That's beautiful. That's right. I think that's kind of cool there. Where's my... Okay.
You put it up there, I'll take it.
Oh, thank you. So that's a very, very important point. I'll give you another example. When I worked in the conference office, I worked there for 11 years, and I traveled a lot. I traveled even to Port Hardy. As a matter of fact, I traveled to this very spot. Guess what I talked about? Who to hire for the next pastor. So to be this gentleman right here. John Felty was in that. Remember, and we sat over here, in the semicircle over here. Well, on my travels, I was leaving Abbotsford, had to get a ferry to go to the island. And on the ferry came time to eat. And you can go, have you been on the ferry? You know, they've got food there. And you go to the place where they eat, and they have these glass doors, and you can open up the glass door, and you can take a cinnamon roll. And an Nanaimo bar. Oh, wow. Okay, for me, it was the cinnamon roll. $4.50. And I love the cinnamon rolls, cinnamon buns, right? I love cinnamon, the sugar, the white flour. You go, wow, that would be so nice to eat. But I know that the sugar is going to mess with my brain. And I'm on my way to a meeting. It wasn't the one before Hardy. And the meeting was a board meeting where there's two sides of an issue, and both of them were fighting each other out. And I had to come and help them out to make a decision. So I needed to have my wits about me. I needed to have a sense of judgment, and fairness, and discernment, and kindness, and wisdom. I needed that. And so when I saw that cinnamon roll, and I wanted that cinnamon roll, I said to myself, I said these words, I'm called to something higher than that. That's what I said. Almost out loud, but so I closed the door. Closed the door. Went back and got an apple or a banana or something like that. And it doesn't always happen that way, but it happened that way this time. And it kind of worked Because I had a goal. I was on my way to a destination with a goal. And when we have a purpose in life, even a purpose for your day or for your week, and when you have to prepare for that purpose, then those temptations kind of get smaller. Sometimes even disappear. You don't even feel them anymore. So, how do we focus on your purpose? But you want to know something else? Unleash your spirituality. Plug into the higher power. Something else? Levify your life and launch your plan. Guess what they all spell out? It's the full power. It's the psychological part of the health message. This is here, and I'm going to talk about that tomorrow morning. Talk about all of these, but mainly the first one. We won't have time to talk about it all. But this is it. Here's another way to depict that. Picture these little bugs, they're little gremlins, they're temptations. They're temptations. And this guy here might have been tempted, except what? He's on his way to his goal. And so they can try all they want. But he's on his way to his goal. So what's your goal? What is your purpose? What drives you to do the good that God has given you to do? Because whatever that is will strengthen you against the temptations. Now, I know it doesn't work every day like that, but this is one of the very powerful principles regarding this. So don't depend on willpower. Treat that pain or that craving as a cue. Make yourself aware that I am being tempted right now. What do I do? I'm being tempted. What do I do? Now, sometimes when I get tempted, I call my wife, drink some water, go for a walk, think about my purpose in life, pray to God. All these are all possibilities, or all options. Sometimes we need them all at once. Here's another one. Romans chapter 13, verse 14, if you're interested. Make your environment support your goals. Arrange your atmosphere, including your food atmosphere, in a way that strengthens the 37 trillion cells of your body. In the literature, I see 37 trillion cells more than anything else. I don't know exactly how many trillions of cells you have, but if you want to count, come back and tell us tomorrow how many cells you have in your body, and I'll put that number in there. But the idea is that every cell of our body needs high-octane fuel, and high-octane fuel comes from the food we eat, as well as other principles of health, but a lot of it comes from the food we eat. So here's the environment of that refrigerator. Oh, look at her. What's her atmosphere? If she didn't have that chocolate cake, she wouldn't have been tempted. If she was really addicted, she would have gotten into her car and driven down the road to where she could get the chocolate cake. But right now, without chocolate cake, it's more inconvenient, and that's what we want to do. Make unhealthy decisions inconvenient. That principle came from a book called Atomic Habits, written by James Clear. Now, here's a sad story. Actually, no, it ends up as a happy story. What does this look like to you? Anorexia, yeah. Certainly, someone hasn't eaten enough food. This is a drug addict, and she's on the street. She does more drugs than she doesn't eat much food because she wants the drugs. Now, here's the same girl 9 months later. Here's what she wrote on Twitter. Left, on the left. Me, completely broken. 93 pounds, living on the streets, living in fear and pain, addicted to meth and heroin, and ready for my life to finally end. I had endocarditis twice from using, and I had a hole in my heart. My mom took that picture when she went to rescue me. Picture on the right. I took this picture tonight. Didn't care about the angles, just wanted to show my happiness. 9 months clean. I fought hard for months in the hospital. Survived heart surgery, gained 40 pounds, got a place to live. I have my family and my 2 cats that help me. That's very important, family and her 2 cats. Because the third principle of full power is the love of God. Family and her 2 cats. I've posted this pic before, but my story is important. Recovery is possible and it's worth it. So she writes this. People see it. They say, girl, you're wonderful. This guy says, keep it going. We're all addicted to something. I thought, that's insightful. It may not be heroin, but it's something. The difference is you're eating yours. And now, here's the after picture. Recognize that guy. About 3 years ago or something. I'll show you the before picture. I think I was about 54, about 62 there. Some of you may remember me when I look like that. But I have to tell you. Well, first of all, I need to tell you. This person and this person have the same thing going on in their brains. More intense up here for sure. I wasn't an addict on the streets or anything like that. And this person and this person have gone through recovery. So I'm going to tell you what happened there. One Saturday night, I ate a lot of junk food. And I loved it. That's when I had potato chips, french fries, ice cream, chocolate bars, whatever I had. And I ate till late at night, until like 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. And oh, boy, did I suffer after that. Oh, I woke up with a stomach ache. Oh, I know why. I mean, I knew exactly why I was hurting. I did it to myself. I said, oh man, I'm never going to do that again. Oh. A month later, I did it again. Why? Because I love junk food. And I wake up with that pain. This time I wake up in the morning. And it's just wrecking my body. And I say, oh, never again, never again. As soon as I said those words, I have a childhood memory. And here's my childhood memory. I'm 10 years old. And I'm living in New Brunswick. My father's in the Air Force. They were stationed at New Brunswick. And my extended family, my grandparents on both sides, live in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It took 6 hours to drive the distance, and I anticipated the drive in the summertime because going to Grandma's house, either Grandma, was like going to Disneyland. I loved going to Grandma's house. Loved it. She fed me lots of good stuff. And my grandfather always gave me a silver dollar. And sometimes my grandfather would take the rowboat, turn it upside down, fill it with water, and that would be a swimming pool. It was just so fun to go to Grandma's house. And she had, I guess it was sort of a medium-sized house, a little big, I suppose, but there's bedrooms for us to sleep in. So I had my own bedroom, used to be my aunt's bedroom at one time. Parents sleeping over there, I have 3 siblings, they're sleeping in different places. Now it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I hear a terrible sound. I'm in bed, I'm sleeping, but I get woken up. It's my grandfather. He's yelling. He's yelling at my grandmother. It's 3 in the morning. He's yelling obscenities, swear words, sexual words, abusive words. Words that I've never heard before as a 10-year-old boy. And I get scared. Why is my grandfather yelling like this? And not only that, but my grandfather is normally a passive kind of man. And I've never, ever heard him talk like this. just yelling and screaming and just abusive words. And I'm scared, and so I pulled the blankets over my face and try not to hear it. And I'm kind of traumatized by this. I fall asleep, and my mother wakes me up that morning. Come on, we're leaving. And so we left to go downstairs. Downstairs was like a makeshift apartment, and we ate breakfast down there. All 6 of us, mother, father, and the 4 of us kids. I'm the oldest of 4. And it felt strange, really, really, really strange to eat downstairs. It was kind of not furnished as well, and I said, Mom, can't we just go upstairs and eat breakfast like normal with Grandma? Grandma would make us pancakes or whatever. No. Dad, can we go upstairs, Dad? No. Well, luckily I have 3 siblings who need attention, so while my parents were giving them attention. So I'm going up this is like a spiral wooden staircase that my grandfather made, because my grandfather was a carpenter. And so I walked up. It's dark. I opened up the porch door, walked through the porch, walked into the kitchen, and it's all dark and it's eerie, it's silent, it's eerie. It's like the normal sounds you're supposed to hear in the morning just aren't there. It's just dead silence. Like, what's going on? So I walk across the kitchen, about to go into the living room where all the stuff normally happens. I go, and I see what looks like a dead man on the floor. It's my grandfather. He's on the floor. His shirt is open. He's got a big beer belly with vomit all over it. And his neck is kind of cricked up against the couch, so it's like right there. There's lying flat on the floor. It looks like he couldn't breathe. No wonder he looks dead. Maybe he is dead. I don't know what to do. So I start to back up. By his hand is a rum bottle. It's empty rum bottle. My grandfather used to have rum a lot. He's an alcoholic. And I back up and I go back down those stairs. And I never told my mother or father about it. Until 2 years ago, when I was writing the story for the book. I called up my mother. I said, do you know I did that? No. And 3 days later, we leave to go to my other grandmother's place, and we come back 3 days later. Now, my granddad is sitting in the chair. He's alive. Hasn't shaved in 3 days. He's got a scruffy face. But he's sitting in his lazy boy chair. And the 7 of us, my grandmother and the 6 of us, are sitting in a semicircle around him. And I'm sitting here, and he's sitting there, and all my family are kind of like this, right? But I'm sitting over here. And I'm facing my grandfather, and there's friendly talk. Then my grandfather stops the talk. He turns his head, he looks directly at me, and he could tell that I was hurt by what he said to my beloved grandmother. He could tell, and he felt guilty. I guess my mother and father talked to him or something, I don't know. But when he turned his head and looked straight into my eyes, he said to me, never again, never again. He said to me. And I was so relieved. Grandfather making a promise. He was never going to get drunk again. He was never going to say those awful words to other people again. And so I go back home to New Brunswick, and I hear that my grandfather got drunk again. I go, oh. And I remember at the time, it's not just, but like, it's scary. And then a month later again, and then again, and again, and eventually my grandfather died of complications from alcoholism. He had been an alcoholic died at 86, drinking alcohol maybe around 10 or 12. And And so my grandfather, being a well-known alcoholic, saying those words, never again, twice. Now here I am saying the same words twice. Never again, never again. Am I? Did I inherit these genes or whatever it is, this propensity for addiction? Is that why I just hurt myself? I knew what I was doing was harmful and I did it anyway. Is that what was going on here? Because my grandfather's just like me and I'm just like him. So I had to find out. Am I? Is it like, can you be addicted to food? Drugs, yeah. Cigarettes, yes. Alcohol, I do. But food? No, not food. So I began to do some research. And it was just before I started writing this book. This was like 4 or 5, 6 years ago. And I was asking myself this question. Because I'm a researcher, I just like to read and learn and all that kind of stuff. I looked up the DSM-5. DSM stands for, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th edition. There's about, 9,000 addictive behaviors, and all the psychologists and psychiatrists and the family counselors and addiction people, they know about this. They know about this Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So I look it up. I'm looking for stuff about maybe me, just to see. Surely I'm not an addict. No. I'm a pastor. I'm not an addict. Started thinking. But I want to be honest. I want to be honest with myself. Overall, the diagnosis of a substance use disorder. That's what they call it now. A substance use disorder. On a pathological pattern, which is harmful, of behaviors related to the use of a substance. These 4 major groupings of addictive behaviors, here they are, and I'm now waiting with bated breath to see if I have these 4 addictive behaviors, to see if I'm like an addict. Number 1, lack of self-control. Well, I sure have that. Symptoms such as unsuccessful efforts to cut down or stop using, they're talking about drugs here, not food, but anyway. Sometimes due to uncontrollable craving. I have that. I have one under one. I have to read the next one now. Social problems. Symptoms such as neglecting major role obligations or relationships at work, school, or home. As far as I knew, I didn't have that. Maybe I was deceiving myself. No, but I didn't think that I had it. I thought I was being responsible, my obligations and my work, school, etc. So I said I got 1 under 2 now. Next one. Risky use. Symptoms such as failure to abstain from using the substance despite the problems it's causing. I had that. It was causing problems, and I still did it. Risky use. So now I've got 3, and I've got 2 out of 3 right now. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm an addict, just like my grandfather. 4, physical dependence. Symptoms such as tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance is needing more of the substance to achieve the desired effect, or a markedly reduced effect when the usual dose is consumed. Withdrawal is signaled by psychological and physiological discomfort when the reward is not reached. I kind of had that, but kind of didn't. So I gave myself a half point. So out of 4, I had 2.5. That's how I kind of measured myself, about 2.5. Then I started reading this book. And I'm not finished my research on food addictions to find out if I had one. And Dr. Gabor Mate, who worked with Vancouver's downtown east side drug addicts, the worst in the world perhaps, he says My addictive compulsion, because he had his own addiction, not to drugs, it was a behavioral addiction, caused me to betray my true values and disregard my true goals. Short term, long term. You participate in the short term, but in doing so, you betray your future self. You betray yourself, the long-term goals you have. And so this is what he was saying, and I was relating to it. But now, I need to figure out what caused it. Why? I mean, I was talking to somebody from Arizona about this. She said to me, why would you eat unhealthy food? She said, the answer is pretty easy. It tastes good. That's why. It tastes good. That's why I do it. It gives you pleasure. That's why you do it. Okay, that's the easy answer. But if you know you're hurting yourself, then why do you hurt yourself? Because you're not thinking of the long-term consequences. You're only thinking of the short-term pleasures. This is quite profound. It's needed to help us understand why we do what we do. And so I want to get to the bottom of it because this is actually a book about the root causes. Not just the one step behind the symptom, what causes the symptom, but what causes the thing that causes the thing that causes the thing that causes the symptom. Number one, ACEs, and number two, stress. Do you know what ACEs are? They're not those things in a deck of cards. ACEs there. But ACEs, A-C-E is another acronym, stands for adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences. Like abuse. So I was reading about ACEs in this book by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. At the time she wrote the book, she was a Surgeon General of California, the very first one. And she was working in either San Francisco or Sacramento, I forget where. In her book, she talks about treating her patients. And her patients are mostly adult patients, but she found out that the diseases that those adults had, that the more diseases they had, like addictions and depression and heart disease and diabetes, suicide, all those terrible things, they had more of them if they had more adverse childhood experiences when they were children. And she was reading some studies, and a big, big study that was done on this, and she was sharing this. And she calls it the deepest well. And I won't get into the metaphor there, but healing the long-term effects of childhood adversity. So let me see if I can explain it a bit. Sorry if you have had. There are 10 experiences that children could have that are negative. There's more now, but the study was done 20 years ago, and then a lot of things have been written about it since. So it's a major study. Physical abuse, physical neglect, household member who has suffered from mental issues, health issues, sexual abuse, loss of parent due to death, or divorce, or abandonment, emotional abuse, emotional neglect, household member addicted to illegal drugs or alcohol, household member who was incarcerated witnessing domestic violence against a mother. These are 10 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And what they found is that people with 6 or more of those ACEs can die 20 years earlier than those who have none. In other words, what happens in our childhood, and even in utero, even when we're 3 months old, 1 year old, and 2 years old, and I'll tell you why in a moment, affects how long we live. And then 1 in 8 of the population have more than 4 ACEs. And so she said the more ACEs you have, the more likely you have of getting addicted to something when you're older, or getting some diseases. If you have 4 or more ACEs, you have 3 times the level of lung disease. Who would have thought? Lung disease increases by 300% just because we had 4 or more childhood experiences which were negative. 14 times the number of suicide attempts. 4.5 times more likely to develop depression. Why? Because we had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. 11 times more the level of intravenous drug abuse. 4 times as likely to have begun intercourse by age 15, and twice the level of liver disease. So this is what Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris was dealing with in her practice, these kinds of things. And now, because of her studies and research, she's finding out that it was their childhood, not only, but a big contributor to this. And so, adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. This is Dr. Robert Block, former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. He cared. Now, if you want to know what trauma is, the word trauma, and this is what we're talking about, is traumatic when we get it used and things like that. Here's what real trauma is. It's not a word that we should throw around mindlessly, because we do. Trauma is when something really big and terrible happened, and you didn't expect it. It caught you off guard. It could be a tsunami, taking your house out, or something like that. It could be a terrible car accident, or it could be child abuse. It has to be dramatic, felt very, very intense. It has to be isolating, so you felt alone and no one was there to share with. No help, witnesses to witness it at all. And there's no strategy, no resources. You had no way to deal with it. Okay? This is what trauma is. That's what trauma is. And those children who had that went through trauma. And so now that they're growing older and they're adults, it's interesting that the number of those negative experiences that happen when they're young correlate with the diseases they get when they're older. And it's terrible. It's terrible that that should happen. And so some of those diseases are addictions. Some of those diseases are suicides and depressions, heart disease and diabetes and obesity and some of those things. And so that's why when it comes to people who are, doing drugs, over drinking alcohol, overeating junk food, getting sick, I don't judge them. I'm not judgmental. You know why? There's a book that came out, it's written by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. Dr. Bruce Perry is a world-renowned neuroscientist, quoted by Dr. Gabor Mate, is why I got to know Dr. Bruce Perry. And they were talking, and he's an addictions expert, and he was talking about how addicts, whether it be food addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics, cigarettes, whatever it may be, whatever your behaviors, pornography, gambling, that addicts are often accused of either being lazy, stupid, foolish, or doing those behaviors which are killing them. And Dr. Bruce Perry says, don't say that to them. Don't say that. Don't say, what's wrong with you? That's not the question to ask. Because of the knowledge of ACEs, say instead, what happened to you to make you do these behaviors? What happened to you? And that's actually the name of the book, called What Happened to You. Not what's wrong with you, what happened to you. And that removes the moral judgmentalism of people who go through these things, because there's something in their brains that propel them into these behaviors. And in some part, it's not their fault. I'll tell you why. Remember we talked about dopamine and dopamine receptors. When we are young, our brains are developing, like everything else in our bodies, we're developing. When we're in the womb, when we're 1 week old, when we're 2 weeks old and a year old, our brains are still developing. And part of the development of our brains is dopamine receptors. So when we are abused, when we're neglected, when we have legitimate needs as a child and they go unmet, unmet needs, legitimate needs for love, for a sense of purpose and compassion, and those needs are unmet, the dopamine receptors in our brain don't develop. So we now have fewer dopamine receptors. And when we have fewer dopamine receptors, that means we have to do more of that addictive behavior to feel normal again. It's kind of like you have 12 people working on the dock, doing the work, and 2 are fired, and there's only 10 people left to do the work. And you have to overwork the 10 people who are left over, because you still need to get the work done, and they overwork, and they overwork, and then they wear out. That's the same thing with dopamine receptors in the brain. They're overworked, and they wear out. And when they overwork and they wear out, that means that the human being needs to have more of that drug, more of that sugar, salt, and fat, more of that pornography, more of that gambling, more of that whatever it is. They need more of it just to feel satisfied. And when they don't get it, they have this thing they just call unsatisfied. It's an unsatisfied feeling. It's because of the dopamine receptors in the brain. So I learned this stuff. I thought of my grandfather, an alcoholic for 70 years. I called my mother, Mom, did your father ever tell you what his childhood was like? Yes. What was his childhood like? Well, he had an alcoholic father. He had a mother, but his mother died when he was 9 years old, living with an alcoholic husband. When he was 9 years old, he ran away from home. He was caught and put into an orphanage. And he ran away from the orphanage. And he's on his own. Wouldn't you call that adverse childhood experiences? Yeah. And so my grandfather, as a little boy, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11, 12 years old, he's got to grow up fast. He has these pains. He doesn't know how to identify them at all. And so he learns to cope with this sense of emptiness and loneliness and whatever have you with alcohol. And at first it worked. It worked. It kind of soothed the pain and stuff. But after a while, these behaviors, adaptive behaviors is what they're called. Adaptive behaviors become addictive behaviors. And so now, instead of the alcohol soothing him, he needs the alcohol just to feel normal like everybody else. I wondered if I had a chance, if my grandfather could spare my geeking out on neurobiology. I'll sit him down and say, Granddad, here's what's going on with you. I have a feeling it's going on with you. So, because of this, I don't depend on willpower. I have to change depending on habits, but I need to give up the harmful habits and start the good habits. How do I do that? Especially when James Clear wrote Atomic Habits. He says, you do not rise to the level of your goals. I thought we need to have goals. You need to have goals. Yeah, we've got to have goals. fall to the level of your systems, your habits, your systems, your routines. And so, what are your routines? What are your routines? And are they helping you reach your long-term goals? The good news is that as I kept on reading this book by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she told me, she told me, as I was reading the book, she told me that she tried treatments for these adults. She tried different things to help them out, and they succeeded. And what she tried turned out to be the principles of full power. I was shocked and greatly impressed that what she discovered was the answer was what God told us in the first place. And what I was learning about and putting together as full power, it was so amazing. And so healing the long-term effects of childhood adversity, it was through the full power principle, especially the F-U-L-L part. Find your superpower to fulfill your purpose. Unleash healthy spirituality, get with the higher power. Lovify your life, learn how to do relationships. Launch your plan, be organized with your routines in the morning and in the evening. And then the power was about the natural, physiological thing, what we eat, what we drink, what we do with our bodies, etc. So the idea here is to see what we can do on all of these principles. And so one of the tips that James Clear in his book Atomic Habits gave was, if you want to start a new habit, it's actually best to start a new habit rather than cut out an old habit, because it's a little easier. And you kind of crowd out the old habits, what you want to do. So he said, one way to do that, read the book, I recommend it. What new habits can you attach to your current routines, like fill in the blanks. For example, you could say, every time I take a shower, I will take a glass of water. Every time I come home from work, I will kiss my wife, whatever it means. Just, you take something you're already doing as a habit. Everybody gets up in the morning, everybody puts on clothes, everybody gets into a car, everybody puts on shoes. These are habits we do all the time. So his tip is, every time you do one of those things, you stack a new behavior onto that until it too becomes a new habit. Whether it be eating something properly, or drinking, or exercising. For example, I know that my muscles get a little stiff and I need to kind of stretch and stuff. And so every time I put on my shoes, I put my foot up like this, and kind of like this. I kind of lean forward and stretch my legs. All it takes is 5 seconds. But I'm stacking that habit onto putting on my shoes. This is simple thing to do. It makes me feel a little bit more stretchy. And so I try to do that a lot. And so every time I get dressed, I will fill in the blank. Every time I see I will, and fill in the blank. And so there are a lot of them here. I won't read them all. Whenever I open my computer, I will, send a prayer out to God. Every time I go for my morning walk, I will do 20 push-ups. Some good new habit. You just attach it to what you're already doing. Every time I brush my teeth, I will, whatever it's going to be. And so there's a little bit about dopamine here. What time is it? 8:30. Time for us to stop. I'll stop. So again, Dr. Gabor Mate, he's one of my heroes. He wrote a book. His latest book was The Myth of Normal. Don't try to be normal. He says the norm is what's making us sick. Don't be normal. Normal people die of chronic diseases. That's what normal is. Don't be normal. Be healthy. Don't look at other people in the world and try to be like them. They're going to die sooner than they should. Find some principles that rise above the principles of the world. And then when you do that, you don't need to be normal, you don't want to be normal, you want to be healthy. You want to rise above what the normal is. And so he writes these words. We have this idea that what's normal is also healthy and natural. In this culture, the norm is neither healthy nor natural. The norm is what's making us sick. Mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Television, advertisements, whatever's on the computer, it's contributing this barrage of sickness and selfishness and greediness and short-term pleasures and all that kind of stuff, which kills us in the long term. And so I try to figure out a simple answer to this addiction stuff. Why is it that I eat and drink what I know is killing me? And the answer is, it tastes good, yes. But just because it tastes good is not good enough. And so I looked up, read these books, James Clear, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Bruce Perry, and all this kind of stuff from my research. I try to encapsulate everything they're saying in maybe one concept about addictions. And it seemed to me that the cause of addictions is disconnection. Disconnection. Cause of addiction. Disconnection. The cause of the childhood, the adverse childhood experiences. Disconnection. When we are abused as children, there's a disconnection. When we're neglected as children, there's a disconnection. So, if disconnection is the cause, what is the answer? What is the solution? Addictions arise from thwarted love. And so, tomorrow morning, we're going to answer this. We're going to answer this tomorrow morning. But I'll just tell you, if you can't make it here tomorrow morning, I'll tell you what the answer is. It's the F-U-L-L, full power. That's the answer. So we'll talk about that tomorrow morning. So resisting temptation is a byproduct, number one, of the F, find your superpower to fulfill your purpose, the byproduct of purpose. But we'll also find out it's a byproduct of our environment. So what are you going to do to create your environment? It's also a byproduct of good habits, focusing on the good, and the byproduct of good relationships, Lovify Your Life. So this is the What Happened to You book. I talked to my granddad. If you want, email me. I'll give you a document called How to Overcome Temptation. It's basically Bible and all white quotes. I'll give you that. And then the reason why I want to go through this, I go very fast. I want to end, but I just want to get to something to show you. These are the 9 principles of full power. There she is, living a life of full power. She's wonderful, she's doing that. Fact is, though, tomorrow we're going to answer the question, how can we overcome our propensity to kill ourselves with alcohol, cigarettes, junk food? How can we do that? Answer, F-U-L-L. That's the answer. That's the psychological root cause, the root cause. So now we come back to this guy. And he is fighting, but you know what? He's winning the battle. Because he's saying, I'm called to something higher than that. He's got a purpose. He knows his purpose. He's saying, I have a spiritual life that empowers me. That's the U of full power. The U is unleash healthy spirituality. He's saying, I know how to make supportive friendships. We're not going to talk about this too much tomorrow. But it's the L of full power, Lovify Your Life. It's basically how to develop the capacity to love others and to develop the capacity to receive and attract love to ourselves. It goes both ways. It's Lovify Your Life. We need that to help us with our bad habits and stuff. And then it says here, I have a plan that guides me. It's the full power plan. It's the full power plan. That's what it is. So he goes, here he is, he's dumping out the alcohol, he's replacing it with water, and he's replacing it with love in his life. And you see the great outdoors out there, and he looks like he's dressed up to go for a hike. And so he's putting all the principles of full power into play. And that's what he needs to be able to conquer the thing that is killing him the most, the stuff that he puts into his body. And so I'm going to leave you here with this. Fulfill your purpose, unleash positive spirituality, vivify your life, launch your plan, and then the physical part, what you do, what you put into your body, prioritize high-octane food or fuel, omit what is harmful, water up, and then what you do with your body, exercise outdoors, and rest up. And when you put all that together, you got your life of full power, and that's what I want for you, and that's what I want for myself. So come back tomorrow, and we'll start talking about those first four, maybe the first one. We're calling it why you need to find your superpower. Sometimes I have called this, don't even think of losing weight until you do this first. You'll just gain it back again. And so we'll talk about that tomorrow. 11 o'clock tomorrow, isn't it right? 11 o'clock tomorrow? All right, come on back. And so, as you can probably surmise, this is not a normal health program. Health programs don't usually talk at this deep level of what's going on in the brain. But because I promised in the book to get at the root cause, this is why we're talking about these things. I could just say, eat your carrots, eat your broccoli, get outside, exercise, get good sleep. I could say all those things, and it's true. But we need to know why we don't do those things when we know that we want to do those things. So that is why we're talking about this, because you won't hear it everywhere. So I'd like to have a prayer before I go and turn it over to you. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, Lord, as you look down on this world of ours, 8 billion people and counting, all of them affected by sin and suffering, made them to be perfect, but the devil came in and messed us up. And so, Lord, you're in the business of restoration. You understand where we've come from. You understand how our brains are made. How so many of us don't have the dopamine receptors that we need to live a normal, healthy life. But Lord, you've given us principles to help us in that struggle so we can overcome. I thank you, Lord, for creating us with a purpose. Tomorrow we're going to find out how we know what do we need. I thank you, Lord, that you're there for us to have a spiritual life with. We can get power from you. I'm thankful, Lord, for the principles you've given us how to do relationships. You've given us gratitude. Lord, I'm thankful that you want to give us a plan to follow. Something we can do with our time, perhaps even spend our money in a different way, whatever it may be. Routines in the morning, routines in the evening that help us to be. Isn't that life? So Lord, I lift up these people to you. Take them, help them just with one thing. Not everything is hard to do all at once, but just one thing that they and that we can do to advance us in that life of full power. Help us, Lord, to choose that before we go to bed tonight. That we can say, thank you, Lord. Help me to focus on this one thing. It could be just water. It could be push-ups. It could be food that's Lord, help us to pick something easy to do that we can get victory over really quickly. And then we can move on to the harder ones. Lord, we come to you. We know you're here with us. You're reading our minds. You know our hearts. So Lord, I pray, come into our minds, come into our bodies, and help us to make the first steps to get well, to heal, so that we can live out the purpose for which you have brought us into this world. We thank you, dear Lord, in the name of Jesus Christ, our loving Savior. Amen. God bless you.
Hey, anybody have any questions? Maybe we can take 5 minutes or something like that. If
Absolutely.
anybody has any questions, you can, or anything you would like to add. Does anybody have anything?
Any questions? Any comments? Sometimes I say, do you have any questions, comments, doubts, hesitations, or confusions? After a talk like this, I realize it's pretty heavy. I understand that.
Yeah.
So sorry about that part. But you know what? It's good for us to think about these thoughts?